Hello, listeners. Welcome to Third Culture Therapy, a podcast that looks at the ways our culture and heritage impact our mental health. I'm Layla Maghribi, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Kaila Yu. Kaila is a Taiwanese American writer, foreigner, pinup model, and singer, and the author of the new book Fetishised, A Reckoning with Yellow Fever, Feminism, and Beauty. It is a deeply personal and honest memoir that explores the ways in which East Asian women in particular have been subject to fetishistic treatment through the lens of her own life and career in the entertainment industry. Kaila, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Your book, which I just finished listening to in the audiobook version, which you yourself have narrated, it's an amazing book. It's a really searing look at the ways in which pop culture, media, and colonialism have come together over the years to contribute to the over sexualization and objectification of Asian women. It's very well researched and is also incredibly vulnerable. And though you are very honest in reckoning with your own complicity in perpetuating these harmful stereotypes, it's written from the perspective of today's you, someone who's clearly done a lot of internal work, mental and emotional, and a lot of unlearning, I would say. Um, but you are honest about your own part to play in perpetuating some of these harmful stereotypes during your career in entertainment. And I want to know, what is it that drew you to the industry in the first place? What were you setting out to achieve?
I think it was all validation. I mean, I grew up and I was really very invisible, both on like just Asian women on television and media, and just in like school. Like I was boy crazy, and boys did not pay attention to me or ask me out or do anything. And I was also really shy, so I didn't know how to do anything about it. And when I saw Asian women rarely on TV, they would be like a prostitute or some sexy person, you know? um, so yeah, I think I put it out at some point in the book that like if I grew up today with like all the Asian women references, like the K-pop and the not all the Asian women are sexy anymore. I think I would have made different choices, but that's what I saw and it inspired me at that age.
I can understand that. It's a very common feeling among young girls wanting that sort of attention. And of course, being from an ethnic minority or just any sort of difference, you want to feel like you belong. And there are a lot of different issues to unpack with that. But alongside the over sexualization sort of stereotype, the fetishization of Asian women, there's also the other stereotype of model minority, which you also discuss a lot in the book. Why do you think you were more drawn to sort of one stereotype rather than the other?
Well, I was very much the model minority stereotype. I just was that. Like, my parents had us take all these extracurricular classes and, like, take extra SAT classes. I don't know if you guys have equivalent there, but, I was already the model minority kid, and it was not bringing me anything I wanted socially. So I wanted everything to not do with that because I didn't think that was like sexy or cool in any way. Yeah, it wasn't anything I aspired to be.
Yeah, and of course, in that era, in the 90s and the early 2000s, being sexy was just the thing for women to be, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, I kind of bring up this book that I referenced or I read called Feminist Chauvinist Pigs. And it kind of examines this era of the 2000s, which is post feminism. And women thought that being sexual was like, oh, we're empowered. We are in control of our sexuality, really working against everything that feminists fought for. Um, and like celebrating Playboy and all the lad magazines, the Maxims, the FHMs, those were like the top magazines of the day. So yeah, and then Paris Hilton and Britney Spears were our idols. So it was a very sexualized era.
Yeah, it was, and I mean, I grew up in that era too, and I grew up in the UK, which was definitely not immune to that at all. But I wonder how much also your own culture and heritage in your family. How was it for you at home, and how central was your Chinese culture, if at all, at home?
So I'm Taiwanese, so we're kind of anti-China, even though I'm ethnically Chinese. We would visit Taiwan all the time, and I watched a lot of media. Like also was very influenced by like Raise the Red Lantern. I think was a movie that was influential, and I watched like Young and Dangerous, like when Hong Kong movies were really big growing up. I think at home, when I lived at home, I was very much obedient to the rules because there was no choice while I was living under the roof. I might, like, sneak out at night and wear a little sexier clothing, but leaving for school in the morning, I didn't, I tried to dress cute, but it wasn't, like, sexy. And, yeah, I didn't really get into any trouble when I was in high school. I never tried drugs or alcohol. I never, like, had a boyfriend. I never had sex. But I think I was very rebellious by nature. And when I went off to college, I lived in, the suburbs in LA, and I went to college in San Diego. And once I was out of the roof, then all bets were off. They were
And
like,
you were like,
"No rules. Yeah,
"No."
I'll do whatever I wanna do."
Why do you think East Asian women in particular have been so frequently fetishized in Western media and culture? And maybe taking it a step back for the audience and for those who haven't read this book, which I definitely encourage everyone to do, what do you personally define as fetishization?
Yeah, so this is like a big discussion all the time because when I ever say Asian fetish, like the white men get really mad in the comments and they're like, "Why do you like want to judge us for like preferring Asian women?" And it really depends on what the man's thinking inside his head, so we don't really know. But I think a man with an Asian fetish is one that treats the women as disposable, has the expectations of certain behaviors, usually submissive, and they like to say things like, "Oh, you guys are so much better than Western women who, like, have so many opinions and, like, want
Mhm.
all these things." Um, yeah, just recently, I think just, like, 3 years ago, I was walking around my neighborhood, which is, like, Melrose, Hollywood, very progressive liberal neighborhood. This, like, older 60-year-old man comes up to me, and he's like, yeah, you Asian women should, like, teach Gloria Steinem and other women a thing or 2 about, like, how to behave properly. What makes you think that, like, I would think this is a compliment for you to, like, just say so openly to me, but he said it like it was a compliment.
Well, and you draw a lot of parallels in your book with this type of behavior and some extreme violent and political views as well as actions, which earlier in the book you're even tracing from pop culture, like books like Memoirs of a Geisha, which were very impactful in creating a particular idea around women, which is a book that was written by a white man about Asian women. But also the impact of wars like the Vietnam War and the Korean War, and you draw all these links from then to contemporary time and how all of this fetishization is essentially creating a lot of harm and damage. But what's really striking for me about this book is how much it's clear from the way you write that this is not how you thought in your early 20s when you were embarking on a career as a pinup model and then as a singer, and that you were like very actively courting this attention, particularly for your looks and for your Asian looks, and under within a particular guise. Um, when did you feel like that perception for you began to change?
Well, I first was when I was in high school and there were no Asian women movie stars or pop stars or anything like that. But the internet was starting and like I was, surfing around like everybody else. And there was hundreds of websites already in the early internet dedicated to this one Asian model named Sung Hee Lee. And I had never seen anything like that. I'd never seen an Asian woman portrayed in this way, first of all. We were limited in media back then, right? Because the internet wasn't like what it was today or is today. I became obsessed with her quite quickly, and she was probably the most beautiful Asian woman I had ever seen up to that time, and that's what all these other websites were saying about her, that she was the most beautiful woman. And so I spent, like, the next several years, like, collecting all her calendars and websites and just, like, being very obsessed with her. So by the time I got to college several years later, I that's what I wanted to pursue. I just wanted to be like her because I just felt, and then just, like, being completely invisible and then, "Oh, there are men who like women like me," that's so much better than nothing, you know?
Were you really conscious of that growing up? Was your feeling that you were not getting male attention because you were Asian as opposed to a girl, particular age, the group you were in? Were you in an environment that was mixed?
I was in a mostly white community, so I think the percentage of Asians were, like, 3%. And my best friend for a long time was just, like, this white girl who people said looks like Nicole Kidman. So, I saw the attention that could be had, you know what I mean? It wasn't going to me. It
Yeah.
wasn't specifically race specific, but I was just like, I didn't feel attractive.
You at some point understood the racial dynamics within the entertainment industry, particularly in glamour modeling. So, when did you feel or decide when kind of like lean into that culture and that stereotype, if we will?
So, I think race really only came about years later when I started to pursue the entertainment industry, and then I started to get rewarded whenever I wore, like, a Chinese dress or, like, pushed a little bit more Asian. And then the plus, like, when I dabbled in acting, every audition was ethnic. It was like, "Oh, she's dressed in a, Chinese dress and has a Chinese accent," or whatever.
Mm.
So, yeah.
And of course, you were lead singer of Nylon Pink, an all Asian female band. So yeah, it's very clear that throughout your career in entertainment, whether modeling, acting, or singing, that being Asian was very much a part and parcel of your USP, not just only aesthetically, but also culturally and just the way that you're sort of presenting um, yourself. And it seems on the face of it like it was all going beautifully well for many years um, until it wasn't. And you've spoken openly, obviously, in the book about your struggles with addiction and then your recovery, but also through that, a sort of unraveling of many things. How did that come about? And why do you think in the first instance you were trying to escape from that reality that you were in?
I personally experienced violence for Asian fetishization. And I didn't know that for years because when I was in college going to a modeling shoot, I was assaulted in a very public way in a video that went viral online. And I just didn't speak about it because I was so ashamed about it. Um, for decades, it was just always like there haunting me in the background. So right after that assault happened, I started using a lot of drugs and alcohol. So I think the entire time I was pursuing the entertainment career, I was always coping with drugs and alcohol. And for the beginning, it worked really well until, you lose control. But I think a lot of that trauma that I was trying to stuff down was easily pushed down because I was numbing myself.
Have you heard of the silk hair wrap company Paradise Fold? I've been using their 100% silk double layered reversible wraps and turbans for years. And if you love your hair, I think you're really gonna love these too. Beautifully designed, snug, and luxurious, they're the ticket to hydrated, healthy, frizz-free hair. Third Culture Therapy podcast listeners get a special 10% discount on the Paradise Fold website with the code TCT10. Something that I found notably absent when you discuss it is any mention of your family and perhaps a wider community that you were part of or you grew up with, and the dynamics between you and them, their presence, if they were and how that impacted you. I wonder if you could share a little bit about what that personal part of your life, which you haven't shared in the book, was like.
Yeah, my, parents didn't really acknowledge my pinup career. They've never, like, really spoken about it, and I think that's a lot of the, Asian parents' way is just we don't speak about things. And then when I was pursuing music, that was like more able to be talked about. And my mom would just say, like, when are you going to be finished with this music thing? Like, you've had fun with it for many years now. And when are you done? Um, and then even now with the book out, they have my book, but they are native Chinese speakers. So I don't think they read like English books, but they've had the book since like 6 months before it was published. I know they haven't read it because, like, I would have gotten a call, but, like, I've warned them, like, "Hey, there's, like, sexual assault and, like, a chapter about dad and this other stuff, like drugs and alcohol in there," and they're like, "Okay." Like,
Did they know about did they were they aware as this was happening, like, about these things?
I don't think they knew, and I think they turned a blind eye on many things. The assault, I don't know if they know about it, like, I don't know if anybody told them about it. I don't know if it reached, like, parents gossiping about it. I definitely knew the pinup career stuff, they definitely must have heard about, but, uh, yeah, this shows you the level of discussion we're having still, not very deep.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been quite difficult to navigate, like, as a young woman, I mean, from any background out in the clutches of LA, and then having to face what is clearly a cultural, objectification and not be able to sort of discuss that with the people who would kind of understand it the most. Are there other things from your Asian background, from your Taiwanese background in particular, that you feel carried into your emotional and mental state of being? It could also be in a sort of beneficial way.
Well, I think the whole mental health thing of not talking about anything is, like, deeply, traumatic. Um, I think, like, the fact that I didn't talk about my assault for years, I don't think I ever, like, just discussed it with anybody until I started getting sober. I started going to therapy, and I started to talk to other women, and they were like, "That's assault." And then I had to have a whole 'nother, like, a reckoning with it after realizing that, and then it's been decades of, like, trying to not blame, because as every woman just naturally blames themselves for these things, right? So
Yes.
then it's like, "Oh, then I have to, like, unpack all of that." So, yeah, I feel like Asians have a very low rate of going to, like, mental health services. So, that's something that needs to bring we need to have more awareness, frankly, yeah.
And really struck again by how much awareness you bring to this book, and it's clear someone it's written from someone who's done a lot of reflection and work. What was the moment or maybe series of moments, turning points for you that kind of told you, no, there's something deeper here I need to look at and go down that journey?
Well, I think the reason I had so many careers is I kept, like, building things up and then burning them to the ground, and I don't think I, like, discussed that as much, but I would, like, build something up and then just tear it down and, like, burn bridges, and then I'd have to start anew because, first of all, I'd start anew because the other thing wasn't fulfilling me in the first place, and because I had burned everything to the ground.
Yeah.
And that happened at the end with the band where, I think at the end, this didn't make it in the book, but we, like, had come back from the Asia tour and, like, the manager was suggesting that the guitarist become the lead singer, and I was like, "Oh, well, what would I be?" Like, we the keyboard player that we barely have? Like, so, it was then I still stayed on for another year, but then after that, I just quit because I was like, "This is, like, miserable, actually." But, yeah, the recovery thing was only because, a friend of mine, a close friend of mine was in, like, 12-step programs and suggested me go there, and that was when I started getting sober, that was the turning point in my life, because when you're not sober, you can rationalize everything and be like, "Oh, like, everything makes sense in your, like, head, or you'll, like, come up with the explanation, but once you get sober, like, there's no running from things anymore.
And is that when you started to go to therapy and sort of unpack your past and the traumas that you experienced?
Yeah. I mean, because in the 12-step program, it's built for that. So you work with a sponsor and you literally write out your life history and go over it with a person. So there is no, you are just literally looking over your life and analyzing it and like what went wrong. So um I recommend it for anyone. Like not
Yeah.
even just addicts. Like I feel like anyone
Oh
could
god, yeah.
benefit from looking over their life.
Definitely, definitely, and I am an advocate of therapy as talk therapy as much as well, along with any and many other alternative therapies. So I'm curious how that process was for you, especially when it came to confronting the aspects of Asian fetishization and looking at how that has been this running theme and perhaps really guided so many of your choices, maybe not always the best ones. How confronting was that for you? And how did that even come about?
Yeah, I mean, what I've been doing a lot of specifically is that my therapist uses like IFS therapy, which is like internal family systems. So a lot of my work has been like, oh, my inner child and being kind and reparenting, and then separating the different parts who like wanted validation or like my rage parts. And like, I'm very self critical. So I'd be like, oh, I hate that part of me that has a lot of rage, but the whole point is, like, being thankful for that part because it served a purpose to protect you at a younger age when I had to fend for myself, even though I had, like, a great family, like, emotionally, I had to fend for myself, because I don't think we as a society were even talking about mental health the same way back then. So, yeah, the reparenting thing's a trip because it is I, like, feel like just this past year alone, having, like writing the book was a form of therapy, and then, like, having people read it was, like, a kind of horrifying version of therapy, but also very healing. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's still ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say this process of writing the book must have been incredibly therapeutic for you. I'm in the process of writing a book about my family's history, but like a family over 100 years of displacement across the Arab world until I was born and raised in the UK. And honestly, like every few pages I'm writing and I'm like bawling, crying, crying, crying. And then I'm like, and then the other day I gave a few chapters to my sister to read. And then she was just like, "Damn you, I've been crying every 2 pages." I was like, yeah, good luck with that, it's a lot. It's really a lot of excavating that you have to do. But in particular with your book, obviously it's the personal account of your story, but overlaid with the idea of what it means to be boxed in, and over sexualized in this way. And I wonder, like, how confronting was it for you to get to this point to realize, which you are incredibly, incredibly honest about. And I'm so grateful for that. You're so honest about recognizing that you benefited from a situation and that you actually fed into certain tropes or stereotypes for your personal benefit that you now recognize as being really harmful both to yourself but also to other women. Was there a particular moment you had a sort of light bulb moment on that, or what did it grow over time?
It I was definitely not aware of it while I was doing it, and I feel like the patriarchy is built in a way to make women compete for scarce resources, so it's like we are living in this world where we're trying to navigate being feminist and, like, supporting other women when it's, like, structurally built against us. So I think just the speaking about it and the awareness, like, I think when I was growing up, we weren't talking about it at all, so, like, no one was aware of anything. But also feel like I'm hopeful about things because I feel like Gen Z and younger are so much more aware and, like,
How much more aware?
pointing things out than, like, analyzing things as they
Yeah.
happen instead of
Mhm.
decades later.
Hey, are you enjoying this episode? Well, let us know. In fact, better yet, let others know by sharing the show with them. Follow Third Culture Therapy Pod on Instagram, YouTube, and Substack, and listen to the show on all the usual channels. Now, where were we? While you were looking at, obviously, this topic of the fetishization of Asian women, were you able to draw any parallels, or did you connect with other ethnic minorities who might have felt the same way, although albeit perhaps manifesting slightly differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Black women have also experienced fetishization, with different stereotypes and different imagery. Um, Latina women also. Black men experience fetishization. Asian men are now experiencing it with K-pop and, like yeah, so, um, it's very interesting, and yeah, I included so much historical information in my book because I was so fascinated as I was learning alongside writing it, you know? There was, like, the shocking military history, which is still happening in Okinawa, so it's not like, 100 years ago, America was occupying countries and, like, mistreating women, like, there was just a Marine in June who was arrested for raping another Okinawan woman, of which there's been hundreds of cases. So and no one's talking about it. Like, I actually pitched that article to several major outlets and nobody took it, and, like, this rape is, like, happening right now still, like
Oh,
yeah, so but nobody wanted to take the story, so I made a
gosh,
TikTok about it. Yeah.
shocking. Wow. And what advice would you give to your younger self, but even a woman now, an East Asian woman today who wanted to enter the entertainment industry and who recognizes that there are certain benefits of leaning into a certain stereotype and for commercial reasons, but also wanting to warn them of the pitfalls and particularly the way in which it can be damaging to one's emotional and mental well-being.
Yeah, it's so complicated because I never want to, like, police women for, like, leaning into their sexuality because maybe that is very naturally fulfilling for some women, you know? For me, it wasn't authentic because 'cause I'm not naturally that way, but for somebody else, it might be, you know, not damaging to them whatsoever. But I would just like, my advice for all people is that I wish that we were taught to about self-love growing
Mm,
up. I think if women were coming at things from a place of self-love instead of searching for external validation, this applies to men also, um, we might be, less likely to lean into other things that are, like, cheaper forms of validation that aren't nourishing.
mhm,
I've been reading this book that's been changing my life, which is called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It.
mm.
And it is literally just like a short read that's actionable about what this one author did to like love himself and stuff like that. Like something like that should be required reading for
Should be
everyone.
required
Yeah.
reading, absolutely.
Yeah. If everybody came from self love, the world might be a different situation right now, you
Oh
know?
god, absolutely. If we came from self-love, definitely the world would be a different absolutely different place, but there is also something to be said. Yeah, as you said, it is complex because on the one hand, those who want to enter into particular industries, even if they, are a bit dangerous or have, certain consequences are free to, but it's more about the awareness around it. What advice would you give, men who think they may just have a harmless type?
I think that I mean, not to plug this, but I feel like they should read the book maybe or do your own research. Like, if you're with an Asian woman and you don't have an Asian fetish whatsoever, you should still learn about the history of it. Because don't you wanna know about the culture of your partner? Like, if I'm with a Irish guy who's from Ireland, I wanna know about Irish history, you know?
Mhm,
So you should know the history of how the Asian fetish is born of violence, it's born from military occupation, and not because you have an Asian fetish, but then that would probably make you understand your partner better, right? Of,
mhm.
like, what she is, because every Asian woman has experienced Asian fetishization.
This is I think where on the one hand, it's great to hear you say talking about this and spotlighting it, and I think those who read know about it. But there is also the other side, which makes me wonder if things aren't just going to get worse with the advent of, with the increasing hardcore pornography that also, with the specific categories, several of them which are Asian specific and very violent and absolutely horrific. So on the one hand, increasing awareness perhaps, but also increasing perpetuation on the other. Where do you feel like things are landing?
Yeah, I do feel like we are making a lot of progress because, like, growing up when Memoirs of the Geisha was the only movie about Asians, then you could say, okay, well, for Western men to leave with the idea, it's understandable because that's the only example that exists. But now that there's so many other examples, there's no excuse for it anymore. But the one thing I kind of bring up in the book is that, like, South Korea is a heavily patriarchal culture. The beauty standards that they have to live up to and the youth standards are, like, probably double what we face here in America, and that inevitably is gonna seep into the K-pop that is being broadcast to the world, so, it's important to be aware of that also.
Yeah, it's important to be aware of that. I mean, you all mentioned, I think, in South Korea, they have one of the highest, if not the highest rates of plastic surgery. Is that right?
Maybe the highest, yeah, but at
Um,
least definitely one of the highest.
yeah, it's very up there. But I also wonder how much, and this is why I'm getting very fascinated with the history of these places and how much conflict and occupation and colonialism and certain, the white model beauty standards as well impact and influence and morph together. And sometimes it becomes a little bit hard to know when one thing begins and one thing ends. um, but I think again, something that at least, you explore or you open up as a topic of exploration are these different facets of like, look at the history and look at the conflict and look at the beauty standards and look at the family and look at like where you are and um, what are the driving influences for the decisions that we're making subconsciously and going back to the self-love. And if you don't have it, of course there are many reasons where that manifests, and it's not just something that is exclusive to those from ethnic minorities or immigrant families, but it's definitely an added burden. It's an added layer when you don't see yourself um put up on par with others, and that has a really long lasting impact, as you beautifully articulate in your book. Um, so how do you see your role evolving now, from your careers before, and where you're at now? You mentioned earlier that you build up careers, and then at that time you were sort of smashing them down, but you are in a very different place now. Um, what are your hopes for yourself going forward, and also, if you have any, for other Asian women in entertainment or as writers?
I feel so, lucky to have found this accidental writing career, um, because, like, if I mean, I quit the entertainment industry a while before, but, like, that for me, for my set of traumas, like, the entertainment industry is, like, the worst industry for me to be in. It's just, like, one where it competes on youth and beauty and, like, disposability is, like, the basis of it, and I don't think that applies to writing as much, like, um, we can write till we're 99, right? It doesn't matter
Yep.
what we look like, so that is such a priceless gift, and I feel like Asian women today already feel like they have a vast amount of choices because, like, even if there aren't as many pop stars, Asian American pop stars as I would like to see, there's, like, so many influencers, like, oh, you could be a cooking influencer or a fashion girl or, like, there's, like, a plethora of choices. So, if you could take a step back, I guess, advice-wise and just see if you're chasing something out of validation or genuinely, like, this is what you like, makes you passionate and authentic to your core.
Mm.
Um, because I was spent decades chasing validation. 10 years into my music career, like, a therapist sponsor person said to me, like, "I think this music thing makes you miserable." And I was like, "What?" Like, I love being in a band. Like, I was very indignant when she said it. And it still took me another year, but I was like, "Yeah, I think this thing makes me miserable." So,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, you touch on that in the book where you're like, actually, I didn't really enjoy it that much. There were
Yeah.
certain elements that I enjoyed, and it was interesting because you touched on something that I think is a real key and something that gets spoken about a lot on this podcast. You don't use the word community, but for all intents and purposes, your bandmates were your
Yeah.
community. And you actually love that. You love being with
Yes.
them and having the strength in numbers and being and in many ways you were role models. I mean, you absolutely were role models. And that you must feel empowering in and of itself. But I love how you sort of had this moment of clarity. You were like, that's actually what I love. How much of a connection now do you keep with your former colleagues in entertainment? Has your life shifted from that quite markedly? And are you really much more focused now on sort of writing and building that career? Where would you like to take it?
Yeah, for my bandmates, we're family. So we're on a group chat and probably somebody's talking every day. But they have everyone's moved. Kiki, my best friend guitarist, is like on tour with the Smashing Pumpkins. So she's off doing her thing. But we're still chatting every day on that group chat. So I think, um I did spend 10 years in the music industry, and I didn't get to, like, worldwide fame as we were trying to get to, like, household name status, but, like, I left with, like, family. So I think that's, worth even more. And then, yeah, I think I'm just, like, working on a next book idea and just, like, continuing to, like, bring awareness to these issues and, um yeah, I'm looking forward to, like, just exploring writing as maybe a permanent career, you know? Yeah.
I think you absolutely should, definitely. And in terms of your own mental and emotional evolution and therapeutic practice, you mentioned at the end of the book, and obviously we've spoken a lot about your own recovery and therapy, but also certain practices that you now incorporate. Spirituality obviously is one of them. But I wanted to unpack a bit what that meant for you. And I also love your anecdote about free diving and how you went down that as a sort of therapeutic practice, but then quickly found yourself falling back into old patterns of sort of competition, unhealthy competition. And I think that's a really important thing as well for people to note, that sometimes we can just replace one addiction with another, even though it seems like it's a good idea because it's not as bad as like smoking or
Yeah.
drinking, doing drugs. But like the mindset can still be the same, and it's actually about the mindset shifting. And so, yeah, what are your practices that you have now cultivated to bring you mental and emotional balance? Let's say.
Yeah, I'm, like, lightly Buddhist, I'm not, like, a strict Buddhist, but I, like, do 20 minutes of meditation in the morning and then, like, 5 minutes at night, so I think that's, like, very important to just, like, get myself out of my head and get started. And then sometimes I'll do 3 pages of morning pages,
Oh,
which are just like freehand writing, which I think are good for writers, but anybody but the point of it is just to get all the, like, mess out of your head so you can, like, approach the day a little un untethered with all this other subconscious stuff. But then I'm also still going to therapy and, like, still doing, step work in they say in recovery that when you finish those steps, you just start them again. So it's
right.
like a lifelong process. So the first time you do them, you're at this level and able to unpack this much, and then, like, you go deeper and deeper every
Yeah, of
time. So,
course.
yeah, it's a
It's
lifetime
very
thing.
much
Yeah.
lifelong process. And do you feel the desire now to connect at all more deeply with your heritage, given that you've spent so much time talking about Asia, Asian women, how much is this awareness now of whether you like it or not, this heritage being a huge influence on you positively and negatively, has made you want to sort of understand it better?
Yeah, I mean, am always reading a lot of history and learning about, different cultural aspects, but I feel like I'm deeply mentally tied to Taiwan, and I visit there once a year,
Mm,
or try to at least. I haven't made it this year yet. I'm also a travel writer, so I do a fair amount of traveling. Asia is, like, my favorite place to go, and then I'm also partially a food writer. I'm really obsessed with food, so, like, food's another way I really like to connect.
Quick question I just occurred to me to ask that do you feel different when you're in Asia?
That's a good question. Um, I definitely feel something, like, when you feel a little bit of home, like, if I went to London, I wouldn't have that same feeling, but
Yeah.
when I go to, like, even Thailand, I'm not Thai, but it
Yeah.
just feels, like, familiar somehow.
Mhm.
Yeah. But it's interesting because Asians have this experience where they don't feel at home in America or at Asia. Because like,
Mhm.
when you go to Taiwan, they're like, "Oh, they know you're ABC," which is
Yeah.
American-born Chinese, they can tell immediately, so it's not like you entirely fit in either. But it does still feel comforting, I think, to
Yeah.
be there.
Well,
Yeah.
that is the burden of the third culture people. We don't really fit in anywhere, which is why it's really important to find the community that is kind of based on interests, values, and reciprocity, I would say. And then you kind of find your tribe in that way. But thanks so much, Kayla. It's been honestly, it's been incredible speaking with you. I really loved listening to you narrate your very wonderful book. I highly recommend it to others, and I really look forward to seeing or hearing what you write next. Thanks so much, Kyla.
Thank you.
I would love it if you would like, follow, and review this episode. And please share it far and wide with friends, family, colleagues, the lot. Every little click from you helps elevate this podcast, allowing me to carry on producing great content for you.